Welcome. Thanks for joining me to do some beautiful learning tonight as part of the Light of the Infinite Festival. Thank you, Erez, for the initiative and for generating more Torah, more light in the world. God knows we need it. I feel very honored to be a part of this, and it's just wonderful to teach Torah because then it really forces me to make the time to learn Torah. So please, God, this Torah should be in honor of um, of bringing the light of Geula into the Gola, into the exiled consciousness of our world. I really am very deep, as so many of us are, in this daily experience of living in unprecedented times and prophetic times, and it's hard. We're in the middle of a war, or hopefully towards the end of a war, almost 600 days in, and I work as a psychotherapist. So I'm seeing people in the trenches of how to emotionally regulate ourselves in these very challenging times. And I see what works and I see what works less. And so what I want to share tonight is a vision of some of the practical frames for us as we're grappling with challenging times, some of the most inspiring and moving Torah frames that really allow us to traverse these exceptional times with grace and with higher connection and with a sense of calling. So that's my prayer for our learning together for the next 30 minutes or so, is that it just enhances our toolbox for how we breathe our way through the birth pangs of a new paradigm and a new consciousness that is coming through, because that is really what's happening. It's an amazing opportunity if we just continue to anchor in and anchor into the incredible teachings of our tradition that are going to guide us, and anchor up into just this Amuna place where we know that this is all being sent to us by a benevolent, loving God force who wants our growth, and this is about bringing about more light. So, the time period that we're in, I want to talk about the time that we're in, and I want to talk about time, because that really is at the essence of the time period that we're in. It is all about time. We're in Sefirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, the ritual act that we are enacting right now is the act of counting and everything that that means. And so every holiday, every time period has its own power, has its own medicine, has its own guidance for us. And that's, again, why we need to deepen into and root into our traditional teachings, because it shows us the way to traverse. So the time period that we're in, moving from slavery to salvation, from Pesach to Shavuot, this 7 weeks is a ritualized act of counting. And what does that mean? And that's what I want to try to deepen into tonight, is what does it mean to count? Why does it matter? Um, why is it get the devotion of 7 full weeks of our mind space to be focused on this ritual daily act of counting, and what is the power of that about? So this is about tracking time. It's about knowing where we are in time, where we stand in time, and the power that comes to us. The word for, there are all these words, Hebrew words, just like there's words for so many words for snow, for the Eskimos, as they say. So there's all these words for God, in the Jewish tradition, but there's a lot of words for time, because it's such a huge element. So one of the Zman, the word Zman is connected, which means time, is connected to the word lazmin, an invitation. Each time period is an invitation for our growth and refinement. Also the word tkufa, this was like a time period. Tekef, it's connected to the idea of fierce or strong. So many of the words around time connote strength and invitation for deeper engagement. So that's really what we're doing here. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says famously, you got to live with the times. And what he was referring to was living with the times. We have the time of the weekly Torah reading. We have the weekly cycle of the Torah reading with all of the symbolic imagery that's gifted to us within the Torah reading, and living with that, aligning our lives to that symbolic material will allow us to traverse time with power. And then, of course, we align ourselves with the time of the holidays that we're in. So, okay, we're talking about the Sefirat HaOmer. We are aligning with the power and the invitation of the Sefirat HaOmer leading up to Shavuot. We're living not only in that the weekly and the monthly and the yearly cycle, but we're also living the broader story of a 6,000 year cycle of this period of human consciousness, according to Jewish tradition, is a 6,000 year period, and we're in the year 5785. So we are edging towards the end of of history, as they say, at the end of days. So also when we step back and ground ourselves in that big long story of history and human evolution, then we get power. Then we are strengthened by that grounding in the long story and the time frames behind it. So that's our work. This is all the psycho-spiritual work that keeps us psycho-spiritually healthy vessels. So these are the tools, and this is our toolbox for how we stay psycho-spiritually healthy and how we become vessels for God's light in this world, is we have to work with these elements. These are the elements of our soul. This is the language of our soul, is these symbolic material that we're swimming in right now. We need to be deeply immersed in the symbolic imagery and material for us to traverse this, because what we're going through is so very hard. The birth pangs of a new consciousness is, has to, this big thing that has to come through a small opening, an aperture. It's could be painful unless you know how to breathe your way through it and how to um, symbolize your way through it. Using the symbols and the teachings allows us to birth through this new consciousness. Great. Speaking of birth, this is actually one of the times when I first realized the power of time was when it was my fourth baby in labor, and at this point I kind of knew how to birth kids a little bit better, and I was able to really watch what was going on in my body in birth. And I was noticing the contractions and how long they took. And I noticed that for a period of time there, I was having contractions every 5 minutes. But it wasn't like kind of 5 minutes, it was every 5 minutes to the second. I was watching my watch. To the second that it hit, I would have the next contraction. And I watched my body do this with just amazement, because I always sort of thought that time was a construct that we used in order to organize ourselves. But I realized when I saw my body dancing in a timed pattern through birth, I was like, oh, time exists. Time is a thing. It's not just some concept, it is a force. And it's an experiential essence of our reality and our consciousness, is that we are in time and that time exists. So, and I saw it the same way with my kids. The day that my twins turned 1 year old, they stood up and started walking on their birthday. And I was like, oh, time exists. Okay, so time exists, and it's a force that we need to learn how to utilize, and the more we utilize it, the better. So let's step into the times of the weekly Parsha. Here we are at Parshat Acharei Mo Kedoshim. This is the symbol pool that we're swimming in right now. Is this Parsha? It's about the referring back to the death of Nadav and Avihu, who are the sons of Aaron the priest, who are themselves priests, who die offering up an incense offering that wasn't called for, and they are consumed by a flame of God. And as the tabernacle is being erected. Okay, this is the background story. I'll share with you a teaching from the Shla. And the Shla was the chief rabbi of Jerusalem in the 1600s, okay? We're going back in time here. And he says, this parsha makes allusions to the sanctity of time and space, notably the Holy of Holies, because the Holy of Holies is accessible only at the time of Yom Kippur and only with the person of the high priest. And what are they doing? They're offering the smoke of incense, says the Shla. And he says when we see the word smoke spelled ashan, ayin shin nun, the smoke of the incense offering, this is an indication for us of an acronym of three concepts in Hebrew: Olam, Shana, and Nefesh. Ayin is Olam, Shin is Shana, and Nefesh. Olam is world, Shana is year, time, and Nefesh is soul or person. So the Shla is making this reference to a Kabbalistic concept of space, time, and soul that is really at the one of the core teachings that we have to understand human consciousness and the human experience. We have to understand these three principles. We have to ground into these three principles. These are mentioned in the Sefer Yetzirah. It's in Lorianic Kabbalah. This idea of ashan, this smoke. So whenever you see a reference to smoke, it should immediately catch your ear and your symbolic ear of, oh, smoke is always going to be a reference to these three aspects of our consciousness and of creation, of a human on the space-time continuum. Okay, so bringing in Rebbe Einstein here, of course, this Jewish man who brings to earth, brings to the world the idea of a space-time continuum. And I'm so not a scientist, so forgive me, but go look it up because it really defines our reality, is this idea that space and time are connected to each other. Actually, it's a continuum that's connected that defines our reality. So, Jewish Kabbalah goes one step further and says that our reality is not just space and time, but it's also soul. It's a nefesh, and it brings in the spiritual element, which at some point, the next Einstein will figure out the mathematical computation for what nefesh is and how to calculate it and how to work with it and harness it even better than we do today. But in the meantime, we're going to rely on the Kabbalistic understandings to show us the way, not through necessarily math, but more through symbols to understand what we're working with here. So, go look at Sinai. What happens on Sinai? It says the entire mountain smoked because God descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a kiln, and the mountain quaked. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe says here, oh, here it is, a reference to Sinai, the holiday that we're leading up to right now. A reference to Sinai talks about smoke. And so we need to, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says so beautifully, we need to work with those three elements when it comes to how we receive Torah. So how do we do that, says the Rebbe? In Olam, in space, we must bring the study of Torah to as many places and spaces as possible, bringing Torah throughout, filling it through space. Shana, we must increase the quantity of time that we spend learning Torah study. And nefesh, when we are learning Torah, we need to raise it to a higher spiritual level, that our Torah learning is on a spiritual, it is not just a dry intellectual endeavor, it is a spiritually growthful endeavor, says Lubavitcher Rebbe. Whenever we see Ashan, we need to remember these three aspects. So that's what we're working with right now, is the space, time, soul continuum of who we are. And Sefirat HaOmer is teaching us that how do we refine our soul? How do we enact our soul in the world? It's through space and time, and it's through, in our case right now with Sefirat HaOmer, it's through counting time. It's through being very aware of time. It's through using time. It's through counting time, because time counts. Time matters. And when we bring awareness to time, awareness to the day that we're in, awareness to the larger story of time, right? Every night of these 7 weeks, we refer back to, oh, it's been 3 weeks and 3 nights since we left Egypt. We reference back to a larger story. Okay, that's what we're doing with Sefirat HaOmer. We're putting ourselves back into a larger narrative, and that narrative then feeds us. It allows us to get to where we need to go. Here we are in Israel right now. We are battling Amalek. We are battling the forces of darkness like nobody's business. How do we do it? We do it with guns and fire and smoke. We do it with Torah. We do it with our own personal growth. We do it with anchoring in to an emunah-dik, faith-based understanding of our reality, not just to know how to fight, but to know why we are fighting. What is this battle all about? If we do not have that element in our arsenal, in our army, if we do not know, and if we're not immersed deeply in the symbols of our people and the larger story of the 6,000 years of human consciousness and the story of the Jewish people coming out of Egypt, if we are not rooted in that, we cannot win this war. It's just too hard without those necessary nutrients of the time, the storyline, the narrative, to know where we're going because we know where we've been. I was just showing my kid who's trying to learn how to drive a car. I was like, you cannot drive forward without referencing the rear view mirror, without referencing the side mirrors that show you what's behind you. Has v'chalila, you should try to drive anywhere without a rear view and the side mirrors. Not a pretty sight. It's dangerous when you do not have the larger context of where you've been and the larger story that you're living. And not just where you've been in the past, but our prophetic vision of where we are going as a people. We need to keep that constantly, be checking those mirrors backwards as we're moving forwards. Always checking the larger story. Okay, where am I? I live in this time era. Okay, for me personally, I'm one of those people, kibbutz galiyot, who's going to be the ingathering of the exiles. That's what the storyline is. For 2,000 years, the Jewish people have been repeating this storyline. And finally, I'm in the generation that gets to live it. I'm going to follow the storyline. I'm going to leave behind all the lovely comforts of my family. And because I am part of a larger story that's going somewhere, and I know where it's going, and it's going to an era of enlightenment for humanity. And we need it desperately. So I'm remembering the larger story, and it moves me forward. Okay? We desperately need this if we're going to be able to go through sirens on every 3 days. Like, to live through the trauma, we need to have the truma of the larger offering that we are making of our lives. So here I want to bring a beautiful teaching that is my jam since Pesach, and it's a teaching about a Torah code. I'm really into Torah codes. So one of the Torah codes that is really beautiful is a thing called atbash. Stick with me here. This is going to get technical, but it's going to be so worth it in the end. So stick with me, because it's going to inform our story, and it's going to give us strength to keep pushing forward. So atbash is a code that says that you can take the first letter of the alphabet and exchange it with the last letter. That is to say, you can take an aleph and exchange it for a taf. And you can take the second letter and exchange it for the next to last letter. So you can take the bet and exchange it for a shin, and the gimel for a resh. Okay? And so, for instance, when Yirmiyahu was writing in his prophecies about Babylon, he didn't refer to it as Babylon. He called it Shashach, which is the atbash code for Bavel. But he's encoding in using that word Shashach, using this code, he's encoding a meaning that says, we are going to overturn them. We're going to overturn Babylon, Bavel, by calling it Shashach. Tov. So it's a code that we use that gives us layers of meaning and divine whispers that guide us through challenging times. So here's the atbash I want to share with you. So on the first day, every year this follows the same pattern, that the first day of Pesach, whatever day that is, will also be the first day of, Tisha B'Av. Okay, so here we are. The first day of Pesach every year will also correspond to the day of Tisha B'Av. All right. Then moving on, Sorry, this is not so clear. The second day of Pesach will always correspond to the same day as Shavuot. This year, Pesach's first night was actually on the first day of the week. It was on Saturday night. So Tisha B'Av this year is also going to be on Saturday night. The second day of Pesach corresponded to Sunday night. This year, Shavuot will be on Sunday night because it's the Bet Shin. Next, we go down to Gimel, and we see that Gimel corresponds with Reish, which will be Rosh Hashanah this year, will start on Monday night. Simchas Torah. So Daled corresponds to Kuf, which is Kriya, which means the day that we read the Torah. That's Simchas Torah. And that will be on Yom Daled, on the fourth day of the week. Next, Hey and Sadi is referring to Tzom, Yom Tzom, the day of our fasting. So Yom Kippur is going to be this year on the fifth day of the week. Purim, Vav and Pei. Purim was on Friday of this past year. And then here's where this gets really fun. So you see the Zayin Ayin at the end. So Zayin, the seventh letter of the alphabet, corresponds with Ayin, which was the day that we had on Shabbat, was actually the fifth of ER, which is the actual day of Yom Ha'atzmaut, the day that the modern state of Israel came into being, was on the 5th of ER, which fits in with this ancient pattern. So for 2,000 years, we knew this pattern. We already knew this pattern of all these days, but not until modern history and the establishment of the state of Israel that happens to fall into the same correct pattern. Not until then did we even know what the ayin was even referring to. Who knew back in the day with the Shla? He saw this. He's like, well, nobody knows what the ayin is talking about. I wonder what that is. Nobody knew because it had not come into being yet. Time had not yet gotten to the point where the establishment of the state of Israel had occurred. But we have the benefit of being able to know that the establishment of the state of Israel is part of the divinely ordained plan, my friends. If we didn't already know it, here's just another kiss from God reminding us that this was all planned out long, long ago in some incredible math project that God, cooked up one afternoon as he was taking hits of vodka. Okay, this is trippy that every year it fits into this pattern. And Yom Ha'atzmaut fits right in. But what's even trippier, I'm going to take it the next step, is that the understanding is that we are at the end of history, and that the 6,000 years of history corresponds to the 6 days of creation. So, if we're putting ourselves back into that big story of human evolution, we see that we, in the year 5785, are very much in the 10th hour of the Friday of the beginning of creation, which is about the time that Adam and Chava ate of the tree. It is the time that they ate of the tree, but it's also right before Shabbat. We are right before Shabbat. So that's the understanding, is that when we reach the end of this 6,000-year journey, we enter into a Shabbat, into a messianic era, into an era of Geula. It's an era of Shabbat, of revelation, full revelation of godliness and divinity in the world. And we're so close. We are almost at Shabbat. And of course it corresponds at the end of days to the establishment of the modern state of Israel. We cannot forget that for a minute as we're battling the foes that are surrounding us right now. We cannot forget for a minute that 6,000 years we have been planning this, that this is all part of a larger dance and a divinely inspired and choreographed dance that we get to partake in. But I'm not done yet, because I want to point out to you Ayin Zayin. So the two letters that Atbash together are Zayin and Ayin. This was incredible because this year I had a dream, actually. After I learned this, a couple nights later I had a dream, and in the dream somebody says to me, well, tell me about the Atbash. And I said, but I don't even know Atbash. It's too complicated for my mind. I don't really do math. I'm sorry. And I said this in the dream. I was like, I don't really know how to do the Atbash so well. And then I said, wait a second. Yes, I do. because I remember that Ayin and is connected to Zayin. I said in my dream, and I was able to reach into my brain and pull out this Atbash code. And I was like, the Ayin connects to the Zayin, and I woke up and I was like, I got to learn about this Ayin and Zayin. And shortly thereafter, I realized that Ayin Zayin is the gematria of 77. And we, just this year, just last week, we entered the 77th, we celebrated the 77th year of the modern state of Israel. How about that? But not only that, but Ayin and Zayin spells a word. It spells Oz. It spells Oz. Oz means strength. And most specifically, Oz means the strength of standing against your foes, standing in your truth, knowing your truth, even though whoever out there is telling you that it's not true. Oz means the ability to stand in your truth and your knowing firmly, firmly grounded in your truth, in your strength. It is not just a physical strength, which obviously we need so desperately, and we have, thank God, but it's a spiritual strength that knows your story, that knows the times, that knows that we are standing in our truth, that the Jewish people coming home to the land of Israel is a divinely ordained gift to all of humanity, even though the world is very resistant. That's part of the plan too. But for us Jews, the more we stand in our strength and in our knowing that this is our calling, is to plant this ground and to grow our roots here, we will do it. But we need to continue to remind ourselves and remind each other, and thank God to learn Torah that reminds us so eloquently, so creatively, so exquisitely, reminds us of our story, of our strength, of our calling. It's all here. We can get through this, my friends. Anytime you're feeling freaked out, when you worry about Iran, and I'm talking to myself right now, I wake up in the night, middle of the night sometimes with nightmares and worries. And I just reground in these stories. I just reground in these Torahs. I remember Oz, and it's 77, and it's Yom Ha'atzmaut, and it's the end of history, and I'm strengthened to get through another day. And we just got to keep on pushing through it and birth this baby of a new consciousness. Thank you so much for listening, and we should continue on with great strength.